You're going to, as a group, walk around and write down information about the building, the parts of the street. And I'll go through this in a second, but what I'm asking you to do is we're going to divide into two groups, and we're going to send one group that way and one group that way. And we're going to, as we walk, we're going to go through and talk about what we see physically on the street. Like, for example, how much of this is, whatever, the building is glass, glazing on the ground floor, how big the sidewalk is, how far from the center line or from the traffic lane is. You know, right here you can see this is 8 feet because there's parking, so the traffic lane happens 8 feet to parking, and then the sidewalk, we can pace this out. And so this sheet has traffic lanes in the middle, and then it travel lanes, and then it has various dimensions that you can start to draw cross sections through the street. So that's the first page of the worksheet, and then the second and third pages are. I'm going to go to the third one first. These are what you're eventually going to have. Your form-based code will have something called building, or something along the lines of building envelope standards. And we talk about height, building height, ground level height, upper level height. So this is roughly a 12 foot or 10 foot height, floor to ceiling height. Above this, how many stories? And if there are street walls or fences like this, would be considered somewhat of a street wall. This fence, how high is that? So you're going to go through and look at the elements on the street.
And building envelope, does anybody not know what we mean by building envelope?
And that building, for example, is on the ground floor probably about 40% glazing, whereas this one's about 80% glazing. So you start to see that there's different patterns. There's other things here in siding. We have build out, common line treatment, so the treatment between these two buildings share a line. How is that treated? In alleys, where there's alleys, what depth are they, what do they, that's one sheet we're going to work at. And then the other one has elements, storefronts and glazing, stoops and porches. Those are things you'll see here. Building projections. This one clearly has a building projection. Street walls and balconies. There may be some, and then uses. And this is our least of our concern, but we have ground floor use and upper level uses and front or rear parking. So now, what I'm really, the point of this exercise is to go sort of catalog building by building up the street and determine as you're doing this, okay, here's these elements. Is there a pattern here? Is there a pattern that can be replicated? Does this feel good to me? Does this coming out doing this above roof, does that feel good to be in this space? What is it? Does it feel different than being in that space? Or, you know, so, and start to make, you can make sort of judgments about these things. And at the end of the day, when we go back to town hall, we're going to sit down and you guys are going to write a code for the section of the street that so you're going to say, Paul and Trish, or group, all of us, consensus, do we think that so the way you got to think about it is if, say, something burned down or something got knocked down and it had to be rebuilt, you're going to write the code for that rebuild or that infill. So do you think that this dimension for sidewalk is a good dimension? If you do, that should be in your code. Here you might want that pattern there. So your code is going to actually regulate, okay, we stop this pattern right at that point or somewhere in there, and then a new pattern starts, and that's, your code will say these things.
Yeah, right.
So, and what you do is typically you say, you don't want a monolith. Right. You don't want, I mean, that we know kills the life of a place. Yeah. You know, so you want it. That variation is, I mean, we like the fact that typically that door front is a little different than this one.
We run out of vinyl cladding here with the original brick.
Right.
It's an 80-year thing, right?
Right.
Anything else you want me to write on this one, folks?
It's we know through. Yes.
The kid would have done better saying, I did not see it. Here's two stories over. Nearly 100% glazing on the first floor. Probably 40% on the second. Two stories.
One, say in Hyper Commons, say for example, which is greenfield development or new development, you can actually start to lay out. You will be regulating the street patterns. You will be, so you can start to say, we want an alley here to get behind the buildings. We want. You can start to. You're the people that are doing this. So your decisions will be like, well, we want delivery trucks to go behind. We want the front to be for pedestrians in the public realm. So you can. Everything's on the table in this. It's not. There isn't any. You can't touch that kind of thing. So that it's important to notice these because you will eventually see in a new development that you want alleys, you want secondary, you want redundancy built into your.
About a 2 feet bump out for stairs.
We were all here.
So I just wanted to point out that the big thing that point out is that when the building steps back in this case, you begin to lose a sense of the public realm here. This becomes a public realm for cars. That's what that function is. And the question for you guys is, as a community, would you rather have, say, the gas station built to the edge of the street and the pumps behind? So you would have the pumps basically in the parking area, and this could actually be a building edge, and it would have the same feeling as that and as that. Actually, you could make that 10 times better if you had maintained the building edge. And I've seen it before in other cities where they maintain the building edge, they don't step it back, and you still drive in, and you still have your side drive-through, but the building edge is maintained, so you don't lose that sense of publicness. Patterns that you observed that you liked, and sort of what the code would say to, like, for example, you might say, well, we noticed that all the buildings were minimally 2 stories, so that's one requirement of our form-based code, that they're 2 stories. You might notice that the parts you liked were 80% glazing on the ground floor. So that's another component of our form-based code. You might note that, and these are all things that probably did notice, that there's public doorways about every 24 feet. Is that something you want to put into your code? Or you might be of the mindset that really it should be one monolithic block. I doubt that, but you could write a code that says it's got. I don't think this downtown works. I want it to be monolithic. You could write that too, but the point being that you sort of observe take what you have observed and begin to describe if there's an infill block or something goes away or somebody takes down a building and says we're going to build a new building here, what would your code be to either facilitate what you observed and liked or maybe you didn't like it? Like for example.